Now, the purpose of the Bible is to testify of Jesus Christ. The Bible, from Genesis to Revelation, points to Christ.
The Bible is true in a very strange way. What you do as an educated person is sample that structure that constitutes the sum total of the texts of our civilization.
Because if those four things are true, that there's truth, that God exists, that miracles are possible, and the New Testament is reliable enough to let us know that the resurrection occurred, then Christianity is true. Because if Jesus rose from the dead, game over, Christianity is true.
So, what is the food you give to the soul? It is reading the Bible, the Word of God. And I don't care who you are, you cannot live a victorious life if you neglect Bible reading and Bible study.
But what we have at stake here is far more than that. You know, your life depends on this book. So read it.
Pulpit Commentary, Exodus chapter 38 verses 1 through 8. The further progress of the work. The construction of the furniture for the court. Verses 9 through 20. And of the court itself. On the completion of the tabernacle, Bezaleel and his assistants turned their attention to the court and its furniture, and constructed, first, the altar of burnt offering, verses 1 through 7. Secondly, the bronze laver, verse 8. And thirdly, the hangings, pillars, connecting rods, hooks, and pins for the circuit of the court, verses 9 through 20. Verses 1 through 7 correspond to verses 1 through 8 of chapter 27. Verse 8 corresponds to verse 18 of chapter 30, and verses 9 through 20 correspond to verses 9 through 19 of chapter 27. Verse 3, the pots. This translation is better than that of Exodus chapter 27 verse 3, which is pans. Buckets were scuttles to convey the ashes from the altar to the ash heap. Leviticus chapter 1 verse 16 are intended. Verse 8 of the looking glasses of the women. This interesting fact has not been previously mentioned. Bronze plates, circular or oval, admitting of a high polish, were used by the Egyptian women as mirrors from a very early date, and may be seen in the Egyptian collection of the British Museum. They have handles like those of our fire screens, generally also of bronze. It was natural that the Hebrew women should possess similar articles, and should have taken care to bring them with them out of Egypt. The sacrifice of them for a sacred purpose is rather to be ascribed to their own self-denying piety than to any command issued by Moses Spencer, which assembled, literally, who came by troops. Women assembled themselves by troops at the entrance of the tent of meeting set up lay. Moses, Exodus chapter 33 verse 7. As at a later date, we find Hannah, 1 Samuel chapter 1 verses 9 through 12. And other women who were less worthy, 1 Samuel chapter 2 verse 22 doing. The women who showed this zeal were those that made the sacrifice of their mirrors for God's service. There is no reason to suppose with Hengstenberg and others that they constituted a regular order. Verse 10, their fillets. Rather, their connecting rods, as in Exodus chapter 27 verse 10. Verse 17, the overlaying of their chapiters of silver. This is additional to what is recorded in chapter 27, and is parallel to what we find related of the tabernacle pillars in Exodus chapter 36 verse 38. Filleted with silver. Rather, connected with silver rods. Compare Exodus chapter 27 verse 17. Verse 18, the height in the breadth was 5 cubits. The height of the hangings all round the court was required to be 5 cubits, or 7 and a half feet. Exodus chapter 27 verse 18. It appears by the expression here used in the breadth that the material was woven of exactly this width. Verse 19, their chapiters. This again is additional to the directions given. Compare the comment on verse 17. Verses 21 through 31, the sum of the tabernacle, or weight of the metals employed in it. before dismissing the subject of the construction of the tabernacle. Moses places on record the sum of the gold, silver, and bronze contributed and consumed in the work. At the same time, he informs us who is the accountant by whom the sum was made up, verse 21, and what were the portions of the work formed of each metal, verse 24, 27, 28, 30, 31. Incidentally, he mentions the number of the congregation at this period, verse 26, and the weight of the sockets or bases, verse 27. Verse 21. This is the sum, or numbering, as in Numbers, chapter 26, verse 63. The tabernacle of testimony. The tabernacle, i.e., of which the great glory was that it contained the testimony, or 2 tables. Compare Exodus chapter 25, verse 16. For the service of the Levites. Literally, a service of the Levites by the hand of Ithamar, etc., i.e., a service which was performed by the Levites at the command of Ithamar. It is somewhat remarkable that the direction of the Levites should be assigned to Ithamar, rather than to Nadab or Abihu. Verse 22. Bezaleel made all. The direction of the whole work by Bezaleel is here asserted more definitely and decidedly than elsewhere. Compare Exodus chapter 31 verses 2 through 6, Exodus chapter 36 verses 1 and 2. Verse 23. Aholiab's special gifts are here pointed out. He was 1. An artificer, a general term with no special application. 2. A skilled weaver. And 3. An embroiderer. Altogether, his business was with the textile fabrics, not with the woodwork or the metal work of the sanctuary. Verse 24. The gold. The value of the gold has been estimated by Canon Cook at 175,075 of our money, by Phineas at 877,300 Prussian thalers, or about 131,595. It was certainly under 200,000. De Wet and others have argued that the possession of so large a sum in gold at this time by the Hebrew nation is inconceivable. But most critics are of a different opinion. Gold was very abundant in Egypt at the period, being imported from Ethiopia, a rich gold-producing country, as well as taken in tribute from the nations of Asia. The wealth of Rampsinitus Ramesses III, a little later than the Exodus, was enormous. Rawlinson, History of Egypt, Volume 2, pages 368, 378. According to the preceding narrative, Exodus chapter 12 verses 35 and 36, much of the wealth of Egypt had, at the moment of their quitting the country, passed from the Egyptians to the Hebrews. If they numbered 2 millions of souls, their gold ornaments are likely to have been worth very much more than 200,000 of our money. On the shekel of the sanctuary, see the comment upon Exodus chapter 30 verse 13. Verse 25. The silver. The silver seems to have amounted to about 4 times the weight of the gold. But the value of it was very much less, not exceeding 40,000 of our money. Cook. It may seem surprising that this should have been so, but there are grounds for believing that both in Africa and in Asia gold was more plentiful than silver in the early ages, and it is certainly much more suitable for ornaments of them that were numbered. See above, Exodus chapter 30 verses 12 through 16. The silver for the sanctuary was collected by a compulsory tax of the nature of a church rate. This produced the amount here given. No estimate is made of the weight of the silver freewill offerings, Exodus chapter 35 verse 24. Nor is any account given of their application. It has been suggested that they were returned to the donors as superfluous, which is certainly possible. Verse 26. A beka for every man, literally for every head, from 20 years old and upward. Compare Numbers chapter 1 verses 3 and 22, etc. 600,000 etc. It is remarkable that this number agrees exactly with the sum total of the numbering in Numbers. Chapter 2 verse 32, which took place about 6 months later, and was exclusive of 22,000 Levites. Perhaps the number was lost in this place, and restored from Numbers, chapter 2 verse 32, without its being recollected that the Levites were not included in that reckoning. Verse 27, the sockets of the sanctuary and of the veil, see above, Exodus chapter 36 verses 24, 26, 30, and 36. The numbers given are 40, 40, 16, and 4, making exactly the 100. Verse 28, hooks for the pillars. See above, verses 10, 12, 17, and 19. Chapiters. See verse 19. Filleted them. Rather, connected them with rods. Verse 29, the brass of the offering, i.e., the bronze which had been brought by the people in answer to the invitation of Moses. Exodus chapter 35 verse 24. Verses 30 and 31, the sockets. See Exodus 36 verse 38. The brazen altar and the brazen grate. See verses 1 and 4. The vessels. See verse 3. The sockets of the court. See above, verses 11, 14, 15, 17, and 19. The pins of the tabernacle and of the court. See above, verse 20.